I've been living in an agentic world for a long time, and it's wonderful. Like, welcome to it, everybody else, right?
I wanted to ask you about agentic commerce, okay? Something you've
Yeah.
spoken about in the past. For those unfamiliar, what does that term mean, and how might AI agents transform how consumers and businesses transact in the future?
Yeah. So, first of all, thanks for starting at that point. Is like, what does agentic mean? At its very highest level, it's the idea that an agent is purchasing on behalf of a consumer with their instructions. I joked, I did a LinkedIn post a couple months ago. I have a wonderful nanny for particularly when I travel, and she's been my agent for a really long time. And we do it
I
outside of
love that.
network rules. She has my own Chase card in my name in her wallet. And there was a day she was like, she texted me and she was like, "Hey, like a bird poops on the car, so I'm going to take it to get a car wash, and then I'm going to run to the grocery store because you need like milk and juice." And I was like, I've been living in an agentic world for a long time, and it's wonderful. Like, welcome to it, everybody else, right? And she's an autonomous agent for me, right? In that she's making those purchasing decisions. As soon
Sure.
as we do this at scale with an AI based agent,
Yeah.
we need to
I love that
protect.
analogy, by the way. You've done this
uh,
before, haven't you?
yeah. But we need to protect our merchants and their exposure to potential liability for erroneous purchases, right? So
Yeah.
whether it's true fraudsters or just accidental purchases, the merchants, as they're thinking about, how they can expose their inventory into an agentic world, an agentic shopping world, how can we do this in a way that remains safe for them? So, I'll just give a kind of another top line. So we went to our client event. We host this big rethinking event in Europe every year. We had 250 of our clients, largely in the enterprise space, $1 trillion of payment volume represented in the room, and we did a survey of how disruptive do you think agentic commerce is going to be. So. As discovery from a consumer moves into an LLM and the consumer asks ChatGPT for X item or asks an agent that's using an LLM behind the scene to do their closet replenishment or book their trips, how disruptive do you think this is going to be to your business? Asking our clients. They were like, 85%, 9 or 10. I think this is going to fundamentally disrupt my industry, the consumer experience, the value chain, like how my company makes money.
Mm.
Very worried about it. Second question that we said of 250 people, how many of you have tried an agentic transaction so far? 4 people out of 250 had actually initiated one. So,
Yeah.
Perplexity's had them for 3 or 4 months. OpenAI's had them for 2 or 3 weeks. So this is still very, very new.
Oh, yes.
And you've got these payment geeks in a room not having even tried it themselves, right? So we're very, very, very early in this. And then the crazy question, the third question was, how many of your companies have a strategic initiative at like the C level to develop your approach to to agentic, so to the consumer moving discovery into an LLM, and only 30% actually were. And I'd say that that's
Mm.
resonating as I'm talking to a lot of merchants. Is there's a fear like this is going to fundamentally change everything about my business. I'm very worried about it. I haven't tried it yet myself, and even though I'm worried about it, we're not really working on it because we've got a lot of other stuff going on. So that's the moment that we're in. We're very, very early. But the all of these parties are trying to kind of land grab of what can agentic mean? What role can I play in it? For the people who are listeners who are spending much time in LinkedIn, following agentic, there's a new protocol announcement like every single week. So we
Oh,
had
yeah.
Google announced a protocol, Visa has a protocol, Mastercard has a protocol, OpenAI did a protocol. So we have all these different kind of protocol announcements, which is they're trying to say this is how I believe the industry should work, but really this is how my LLM is going to work, or this is how my card can like play in it. Our view from a Worldpay perspective is, again, we want to normalize this for the merchant. So we want to be able to have one set of tools, one set of APIs that is wrapped around our regular payment processing that lets the merchant, what does the merchant need to be able to do differently? First of all, they need to expose their goods into an MCP. That's a little bit outside of what we do typically, but we can expose those MCPs within our environment.
Yeah.
Second, we need to give a signal to the merchant of, is this a trusted agent? So is this an agent that we believe has good intention and not just a fraudster? Because the fraudsters are all agents too. So the
Of
fraudsters are
course.
coming in, they're going through guest checkout, they're trying to take over accounts. That is also a bot, that is also an agent. And so we have to be able to discern between a good agent and a good actor and a bad actor.
Yeah.
Secondly, even within good actors, fraudsters come in and use those too. So if I have a good actor and this is an OpenAI agent, how do I know that when a card was stored in that agent and given the ability to spend, the right set of fraud authentication was done at that moment? So, did I bind a token to that agent with a established way of assessing whether or not there was an authentic consumer that was tied to
Yeah.
that card. So the storage of that credential, again, network tokenization. So back in my
Yeah.
history there, but network tokenization is a critical component of that. And
Yeah.
then the most interesting is going to be, once an agent checks out, how can the merchant know that the agent is buying the thing that the customer wanted them to buy? So that's a new API, right? The merchant today, if they get shopped as a guest checkout, the assumption is that the thing being purchased was in line with what the person wanted to purchase. But if an
Yeah.
agent went and did that purchase and there's a mismatch, the merchant's liable today. So how do we help protect the merchant from knowing and being able to validate what the consumer asked them to buy?
Yeah.
And that's probably the area that needs to mature the most over the next couple of months.
I mean, tokenization is going to get so important when we have autonomous agents representing our interests left, right, and center. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because we're not going to know which ones are real, which ones are authentic or not. Otherwise, are we? So
yeah.
it's yeah. I hadn't really thought about that. That is how important that is.
Eh,
It's
Yeah. And in the
crazy, isn't it?
early days, what we have is we have agents shopping on a website still. So an agent is mimicking a human in a guest checkout environment. I
Yeah.
actually think eventually it will mature to an API to API, so an agent to agent based transaction, right?
Yeah.
Where the merchant exposes an agent that validates digitally the agent's instruction from the consumer, and that becomes the transaction. You don't really need a website if there's no human on the website, right? So, but if you think about, if you're a
So
merchant,
so
you want to
bizarre.
establish brand, you want to establish customer loyalty, you want to be able to upsell, you want to be able to hold that consumer, information so you can come back to them later. You need to be able to catch that consumer in the LLM, sell to them, but think about how to influence and drive consumer loyalty to you as a merchant without having this traditional front door of an internet that they came to shop in. So
Yeah.
we're wild, it's wild west still, but
Yeah. It
there's it's
is.
a really really interesting
It's
space. Yeah.
coming thick and fast, though, isn't it?
Yes, very much so, very much so.
We can't be too far away from the majority of people having their own AI avatar agent who does shopping for them and stuff like that. It's crazy. Have you? Yeah, I know the OpenAI agent function is. I've had to play around with it. Have you got any other sort of tools that you use regularly on the agentic
Yeah.
AI side of things,
Yeah,
Cindy?
we're working with OpenAI, and we're already pushing into our Dev Center their APIs. So one of the things I really like about OpenAI is, and their approach is, it's multi-acquire from day one. So the
Yeah,
assumption is that the merchants will integrate into their MCP, expose the inventory, allow for those purchases to happen in the ChatGPT environment, but the transaction will flow through their regular processor. So they're really just exposing that endpoint and saying, here's where to send that transaction to. And so then the processor can do everything else BAU to the merchant. Because if you think about these huge merchants, they have a treasury operation that needs to be able to do reconciliation, to close the books on the second of every month, to be able to make sure they get paid. They don't want to view this as like a net new front door. They need it to
yeah,
flow through the back end that they have set up at scale. So yeah, so it's a new discovery process, and that discovery process has a friction-free consumer authentication happening in it. But that needs to flow through a set of rails that is consistent with the rest of their processing relationships.